Henry Brozyna will be walking you through everything you need to know about when lifting an unknown load, because we know this can be risky at times, to help you execute a safety, more efficient lift. He will cover load estimation and help you determine the load's center of gravity. My name is Gisela Clark. I'm the digital marketing specialist for Columbus McKinnon and will be your host for today's webinar. Presenting today will be Henry Brozyna. Henry is an industry product trainer at Columbus McKinnon. He specializes in crane and hoist inspection and repair, rigging, including load securement. He's been training on crane and rigging safety for more than 20 years, and he's a member of the tie-down committee and former board of director for the WSTDA. This group writes the standards that are used by the material handling industry, the transportation industry, and also law enforcement. So before we begin, I just want to cover a few quick things. Henry, if you want to go to the next slide. We are recording the session today. All in attendance will receive a link to the recording. Look for it in your email within the next day or two. Everyone is in listen-only mode, so we encourage you to ask questions in the Q&A pane. We're going to take 5 or 10 minutes at the end to go over that. And as I said, I threw this little graphic in there for those of you that are maybe new to the webinar format. With GoToWebinar, if you're on the desktop, you can go and click that little orange arrow in the top right corner and it opens up and you can type your question where I have the arrow right there. If you're joining via Instant Join Viewer, you can just click on the button as it shows below. So, and then last thing, if you do type in questions, we will be featuring 1 or 2 of them on our blog in the coming weeks. So we encourage you to be engaged and ask questions. And like I said, we may have a chance to feature you on our blog in the next few weeks. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and turn the session over to Henry so we can begin. Henry?
Thank you, Gisela, and welcome everyone. Before we get started, I'd like to inform everyone that, this is our disclaimer that the information herein is the general informational purposes only and is intended for individuals taking Columbus McKinnon online training only. This information is not a substitute for review of the applicable government regulations and should not be construed as legal advice or opinion by Columbus McKinnon Corporation. All right, the reproduction or dissemination of this document without Columbus McKinnon's written consent is prohibited. Columbus McKinnon assumes no legal responsibility, including but not limited to incidental or consequential damages for the information contained herein, conforming to accepted safety practices as the responsibility of the product owner, user, and its operating personnel. CM has no direct involvement or control over owners or users' use, inspection, maintenance, operation, or application of its products covered in this online training. This is the responsibility of the owner user of this product to establish or provide access to training programs for personnel designated to operate, inspect, repair this product. Refer to cited regulations or consult with an attorney for specific questions. Well, now that we got the legal stuff out of the way, we can get into basically what we're talking about today is how to figure out how to lift a load safely that you don't know how much it actually weighs. When we put things together, there are times where the unit's going to actually end up weighing, in some cases, several tons heavier than what we expected. And this is going to most often happen in general industry. When we often presented with moving a load that you may not know how much it weighs. How does that happen? Well, people start putting weldments together. They grab a piece of sheet metal, 1/4 inch thick, weld it to another piece of metal, and it grows. And unfortunately, nobody is sitting there with a scale saying, well, let me figure out how much this thing weighs first, and then I'll weld it up. And then they keep track of all those numbers. And at the end of the day, they add them up and it's like, well, that's what it weighs. We're not doing that. All right. That's why I say it usually happens in the fabrication stages, is we don't know how much these particular items weigh. All right. So the other question that we have to ask is the load symmetrical? And what I mean by symmetrical, is it a nice shape? Is it a nice circle? Is it a nice square? Is it a nice rectangle? Something that we can easily figure out what the center of gravity is, how high is it, how wide is it, things like that. All right. You can see that we have multiple numbers that we need to take into consideration: length, height, width, depth, those things, as well as what we're trying to do is we want to find out how much space this particular load takes in a given area. All right. So when we go to the next section here, to the next slide here, you'll see we have a steel plate. All right, this steel plate's 120 inches long, it's 48 inches wide, and it's a half-inch thick. All right, now this chart that I have listed here, it's only a small chart compared to the vast number of things that are in the world today that we need to know what things weigh. This chart is useful. All right, if you go to the internet, you can download this chart. This chart will literally be, an arm's length long or longer. All right, but obviously for example purposes, I just took a little section of it. And these are some of the things that probably most of us are used to working with. Aluminum, brass, brick, bronze, cast iron, cement, copper, earth, dirt, ice, lead, snow, steel, tin, water, gypsum board, wood. Those are the things that we're most likely to encounter when we're using a crane or a hoist to lift the load. So this list is what one particular material weighs per cubic foot. So basically the size of a basketball. If I had an aluminum block, 12 inches cube, 12 inches by 12 inches by 12, it would weigh 165 pounds. If I took that aluminum and I cut little tiny blocks out of it, 1-inch cubes out of it, basically the size of a dice, they would weigh approximately 0.0955 pounds per cubic inch. All right, so we know what that specific weight of that material is by the foot, by the inch. We know that. Now we can use that information to figure out what something weighs that we're dealing with. All right, in this example, I know it's a simple example, but here we've got a sheet of aluminum. Like I said, it's 120 inches long, 48 inches wide, half inch thick. When we start out with these formulas, we want to find out what the area of that unit is, length times width. Everybody remembers that from school. All right, so in this case, we got 120 by 48 inches. So we can multiply those numbers together, and that gives us how many square inches that plate takes up. Well, like I said earlier, we need to know how much space this particular thing takes up. So we need to know the volume of it. It's kind of like the difference between an HVAC person and a floor tile layer, or a floor installer. The floor installer is interested in how many square feet of floor space there is, so they can order the material to cover the floor, whether it be hardwood, vinyl, tile, whatever. An HVAC person wants to know how much space there is in that particular room where that floor is being installed. So he's going to start out with the surface area of the floor, and then the next dimension that they're going to throw in is the height of the room. Why? Because when it comes to HVAC, we're dealing with volume of air. All right, that HVAC installer needs to know how much air is going to be flowing in and out of that room so that he can go ahead and size, whether it be the furnace or the air conditioner, to facilitate the environment that's going to be in that room. So we're doing basically the same thing, is we're going to figure out what the area of that sheet is. Then we're going to take the depth of that sheet. In this case, it's going to be a half an inch. And we're going to look at it and say, okay, that's how much volume there is. So in this particular case, we go ahead and put those numbers in. We've got the volume, is going to come up to 1.68 cubic feet. All right. Now, if I take that number and look up on my chart, I don't know if you guys can see my cursor here because we were told this is aluminum. So if I go to aluminum here, it tells me it weighs 165 pounds per cubic foot. If I have 1.68 cubic feet, I'm going to take that, multiply it by the number that's in the chart, 165 pounds per cubic foot, and it's going to come up with 277, a little over 277 pounds. That's what that aluminum plate will weigh. So with that information, I can go ahead and now size my rigging gear, my hoisting mechanisms, whether it be a hand hoist or an electric hoist or a crane. And now I can go ahead and size that equipment properly to be able to lift, to be able to lift that load safely. Because now I know how much it weighs. Some people might say, well, is that exact? It's not going to be exact. The only way to find that out exactly is if you put that load on a scale. Then the scale will give you the exact weight of that particular piece of steel or aluminum. What this does is that this gets you very, very close. All right, it's going to get you extremely close. It gives you a really good starting point. Now, with a number like 277, most people would just say, you know what, we're going to round that up to 300 pounds, or they may just say, you know what, we're just going to go at 500 pounds, and that's the way they'll rig it, and they'll rig it accordingly to that weight. So they'll kind of give themselves a little bit of a fudge factor, and there's nothing wrong with that. All right, that just makes sure that you have more than enough lifting equipment, like I said, whether it be rigging gear or hoisting mechanisms, to allow to lift that load safely.
Henry, I have a quick question. Does
Sure.
it matter whether it's inch, feet, or even metric?
It does. It's very, very important that you make sure that you keep the units the same. Here you can see in this example, I've got 48 inches, I've got 120 inches, I've got a half an inch, but down in my example where I did the math, I actually changed it to feet. Why? Because for me, it's easier for me to work in feet. I find it more comfortable. But whether you're working in feet or inches, meters, centimeters, don't mix the two. Again, I'll go back to the chart. We've got 165 pounds per cubic foot for aluminum. We have 0.0955 pounds per cubic inch of aluminum. If I were working in feet and I went up here and grabbed the 0.0955 number for cubic inches and put that one in here, this number would definitely be different, and it could put you in harm's way if you don't have the right units. All right, so I always tell people, I said, if you're comfortable working in inches, work in inches. If you're comfortable working in feet, work in feet. Whatever makes you comfortable, that's what you're going to go follow. It's the best thing to do, because I've taught these classes for a long time, and that's probably the number one error that I see when people in my class do the calculations when it comes to figuring out what something weighs, is they will go ahead and they will forget to transfer the units from inches to feet, or vice versa, or metric, and next thing you know, they're multiplying inches with feet, and they come up with some weird numbers, and they're like, I just don't get it, I don't understand it, and they look back and it's like, it's just a simple thing. You've got to keep the units the same.
Basic math, yeah.
Yep, it is basic math, exactly. I mean, how many times did you remember that from when you were in school? Your teacher or your professor's like, keep the units the same.
Yep. Perfect. Thank you, Henry.
All right, so on this slide here, I have this big circle with a couple of quadrants colored in. This is the universal symbol for center of gravity. Once we know what something weighs, that's a good thing. Okay, that's part of the battle, but that's not the entire battle. We need to know where we can position our hook for our hoist to pick up that load safely. The center of gravity is the position that you want your hook to be above in order to pick that load up safely. When when you see somebody pick up a load and that load comes up nice and horizontal, there's no tilt, there's no slant to it, comes up nice and straight, that's because the hook is directly above the center of gravity. When the hook is offset from the center of gravity, what ends up happening is as soon as the load leaves the ground, the center of gravity wants to be below the hook. All right, it wants to be there. This is what happens is when you pick something up, and if you're not above the center of gravity, that's when loads will start to swing. All right, and that's when, if somebody's standing near that area, or if there's other equipment in that area, that's when you're either going to get injuries or you're going to get damage to property damage. All right, so the center of gravity is very, very, very important when it comes to lifting loads. All right, a lot of times, there's loads that you're going to lift are nice. They're perfect loads. They're nice circles. They're nice rectangles. They're nice squares. They're nice cubes like I have on the screen. Finding the center of gravity to this guy, it's easy. All I have to do is take a tape measure, go from corner to corner diagonally, and I can put a mark there, and it's like, boom, there's my center of gravity. How do I know that? Because the load is uniform. All right, there's nothing sticking out the sides. So that's a good thing. All right, but unfortunately, we don't live in a world where everything comes out perfect. A lot of times we get loads like this, something that's different. It's an odd shaped load. So taking a tape measure and going diagonally corner to corner and putting a mark where the two diagonals cross, and that's not going to be your center of gravity. That's going to actually be the center of the load, but it's not going to be the center of the gravity. All right, so in this particular instance, most people that are picking loads up will realize without even thinking about it, you know what, the heavy part of the load is not going to be symmetrical. It's not going to be evenly spread out. It's going to be off to one side. So we already automatically know that. How do we go ahead and put that down on paper so that when people look at it, they're going to look at it and say, well, okay, this is where the center of gravity, this is where I want to put my hook. And then from my hook, I can rig down to my load. All right, that's why the center of gravity is very, very important.
Hey, Henry, how often do people think that the center of the load is the center of gravity?
Pretty often. You'd be amazed how many times I've witnessed people go ahead and pick up loads, and you can see the load swing rather dramatically. And I'm talking not just a couple of inches swing. That's pretty reasonable. But when you start getting into the feet, it's moving 2 or 3 or 4 feet or more, that automatically tells me you did not even know where the center of gravity is. What you did is you rigged it to the center of the load. Just because the word center is in the word center of gravity does not mean that you're working always to the center of the load. All right, the center of gravity is not it's basically the theoretical balance point of the load. So if I were to take a pencil tip, for example, and put it on underneath the center of gravity, and if that pencil was strong enough to hold that load up in the air, that load would be perfectly balanced. It would sit there like as steady as a rock. It would not move. All right. Obviously, the pencil's going to break, but hey, you guys get the idea.
I can see this is a topic you're very passionate about because it's obviously something misunderstood. So
it is, and the thing, one of the reasons why I'm passionate about it is because to me, I think it's a simple thing that people need to understand, and it'll help keep people safe on job sites, or in their places of business, because it's so easy to get into trouble if you don't realize that everything has a center of gravity. People have a center of gravity. All right, everything has that, and in order to pick it up safely, we have to know where that is, or at least get very, very close to it, because we don't want to the load to start to swing. We want to minimize that amount of swing, because that's where people get hurt, and that's where we get property damage as well. All right.
Henry, one other quick question. Is
Sure.
the center of isn't the center of gravity also referred to as the center of mass? This question
It is.
just came in and I thought I'd throw it out there. Okay.
Yes, it is. It's a very good question, and that is 100% true. It is considered a center of mass. All right,
Okay.
just again, like I said, people, sometimes when you look at a person, everybody's got a different body shape. So that center of mass, that center of gravity is going to be different on every single person out there. So if we were to go ahead and start lifting people up, well, we'd have to do calculations for just about every single one of them.
Yeah, thanks, Henry.
So here I have I came up with a simple example. We have a load here. One, we don't know how much the load weighs. We don't have all of the dimensions of the load itself. So we need to know how to not just how to lift it, but what are we going to use to lift it with? How big of a hoist do I need? What kind of rigging gear am I going to use? Those types of questions have to be answered. And I've got a load here. All I know is that the attachment points for the load are 35 feet apart. So I don't know where the center of gravity is. I do have my attachment points. I don't exactly know what the load weighs, and I can't really figure it out because one, I don't have the dimensions of the load either. So what I can do in this instance, and this is another way to figure out what the load weighs and how to pick it up safely, you can go ahead and pick up one side of the load. If you have a scale on your hoisting equipment, you can attach the scale, lift up one side. On this particular one, if you lift it up side A, you're gonna come up with a reading on the scale of 1,000 pounds. All you want to do is just pick it up a couple inches off the ground. That's it. You don't need to go any further. You set it back down. You go over to the other side. Repeat that. You're going to pick it up a couple inches off the ground. It's going to show it weighs 2,000 pounds. Now that I know that I have 1,000 pounds on one end, I have 2,000 pounds on the other end, I can add those together. That comes up with 3,000 pounds. This load weighs 3,000 pounds. All right, within a few pounds, but it's at that point. If you've ever, I'll give you an example of where you may have seen this in your daily lives. If you're traveling along a highway and you see law enforcement pull over a truck, and I'm sure everyone has heard of the portable scales that law enforcement carries, or some of them carry in their vehicles. All they are is basically a platform. It's maybe a 3-foot wide platform by about 10 feet long. What happens is they put that down on the ground and they have the truck drive over with its rear axles over the top of that. And what that is, it's a scale and a reading is taken, all right, whatever, 20,000 pounds. The truck advances for the back axle or for the rear trailer wheels to now come in contact with the scales, and he'll get another reading. He's going to take both of those readings, he's going to add them together. That tells him how much that trailer is carrying. All right, 30,000 pounds, 40,000 pounds. We're doing the exact same thing here. The only difference is rather than doing it from below, we're doing it from above. That's all. All right, so we're following the same concept. And obviously you can tell it's it's proven technology, it works. All right, so now that I know what each side carries, that's my load weights on each side, I have a 3,000 pound total weight. I need to figure out where my center of gravity is. All right, so if I take one of those numbers, whether it's 1,000 pounds or 2,000 pounds, I've got to divide that by the total overall weight. In this case, I selected 2,000 pounds. Divide that by 3,000, comes up with 0.667. So 67% of the weight is towards side B. And in the picture, it's like, okay, that makes sense. I can tell just by looking at the picture that side B is substantially taller, larger than side A. So that makes sense. The distance between my lift points is 35 feet. So if I take 35 feet, multiply that times my 67%, comes up with 23.45, basically 23 and a half feet. So my center of gravity is going to be 23 and a half feet from side A. Now what I can do is I can take my marker, my chalk line, make a mark there. That is where my crane hoist, or my crane hook, sorry, my crane hook needs to be located over. It needs to be above that point. Now, again, is that going to be exact? No, but it's going to get you extremely close. It gives you a very good starting point.
Okay.
So once we have that, we've got our hoist. It's our load was 3,000 pounds. We know we have to be able to pick up at least 3,000 pounds of load. I have a 2,000 pound hoist, or I'm sorry, a 2-ton hoist. Sorry, we have a 2-ton hoist. Well, hey, my hoist can lift this load. Now it's a matter of selecting the proper rigging gear and complete the lift. So once I have that, I have a 3,000 pound load. I'm picking it up with a 2-ton capacity hoist, which is 4,000 pounds. So I've got plenty of safety factor, obviously. So I can pick up my load and I can pick it up safely. Once that's done, we can all go home at the end of the day once it's over.
Right.
Here's an example. Here's an example of picking up a shaft. Basically, it's an axle. All right. You can see it's nowhere near balanced. You can see how long this particular item is in relation to where the hook is that's picking up this load. You can also see that we've got a couple of different things going on here. We've got a sling attached to this hoist or to this load. We've also got a lever tool attached to it as well. At this point in time, you can see the hook is over the CG. What we've done, we've got a chain sling attached to it to carry the load on the one end, and we've got a lever tool on the other end. The reason for the lever tool is the lever tool will take up any misalignment that we have. So because I said this is an axle, so obviously this needs to fit into some kind of an opening, and it needs to go in very nicely. We don't want to damage the shaft. We don't want to damage the inside of the opening as well. So that tool on the end of there, that lever tool allows us to gives us some flexibility to either raise that back end or lower that back end so that that shaft goes in nice and straight and even into the mating components. So when we do something like this, the one thing that I haven't gone over today was sling tensions. All right, we need to know what the tension on those legs are in order to size the sling as well as size that lever tool. All right, otherwise we could potentially overload them as well. All right, and like I said, this one here, it's the same picture. Again, all it's doing is just showing you how you can go ahead and add a lever tool in there to add as at this point in time, we're calling it a compensator tool. So yes, there are some additional calculations that we have to go through. We haven't gotten into that here today to size the sling as well as that compensator tool. So otherwise, you could overload those particular items if you base it just on the sheer weight of the item that you're lifting. Because as you know, if you go to the grocery store and you purchase some groceries and you walk out of the grocery store with you're carrying the bags, basically at your legs. Bags might weigh 10 or 15 pounds. Well, no big deal. Most people can handle that. But if you take that bag with your arm and just pick your arm so that your arm is basically at a 90-degree angle to your body, all of a sudden the muscles in your arms may start to twitch, and it's like, hey, this thing all of a sudden it got heavy, and but nobody added anything to it. It's just the position that you put the arm in. The angle, that load angle has changed. The tension has gotten greater, and when it comes to picking things up with multiple leg slings like this, that is something that you have to keep in mind, is that even though that load that we calculated out weighed 3,000 pounds, the slings that are actually carrying that load may actually be seeing, depending on the angle, each leg might be seeing 3,000 pounds of force. So this is where a lot of I shouldn't say a lot, but some riggers get into hot water when they forget that, or they don't realize that, and they'll go ahead and they'll size the rigging according to the load weight rather than to the tension that the angle is supplying when the slings are attached to that load.
Mhm. Excellent, Henry.
So got done a couple minutes early.
Okay, well, we do have a few questions.
Okay, sure.
The first one is, let's see, we show a lever tool here being used as a compensator to help level the load. Can the same thing be done with a manual chain hoist?
Yes. Short answer is yes. You would have to be careful on one thing is what kind of a hand hoist you're going to use. If you're going to use something, if you're going to do something like this with a hand hoist, my recommendation would be to go with a hurricane type hoist, which the advantage that you have with a hurricane hoist is the head where the hand chain comes out of swivels 360. So you do not have to be in line with the load chain in order to activate or operate the hoist. You can actually be standing at an angle to the hoist, and the hand chain, the head will swivel so that we don't have any binding or anything like that happening. So that would be my recommendation. Otherwise, it's gonna be, you could still do it with a regular chain hoist, but it's gonna become a little bit of an issue.
Okay. Okay. Also, let's see, do you add the lever tool's weight to the total weight of the load?
You really shouldn't need to do that, but if you want to, you could. In ASME B30.20, which is a below the hook lifting standard from ASME, if the below the hook lifter is in excess of 100 pounds, you've got to include the weight of the lifter. If the lifter is under 100 pounds, you don't have to worry about it. Most lever tools that I have encountered out there today, I don't think they weigh anywhere near 100 pounds. But if it makes you feel better, if you're working that close, which you really shouldn't be working that close, because a lot of the numbers that you're going to come up with when you do these calculations, they're not going to be 100% right on the money. Like I said, they'll get you real close. But if you're working you're working with rigging gear or even a hoist that, well, the load weighs 3,000 pounds. Well, I have a 3,000 pound hoist. You really shouldn't be working that close. That becomes an issue in itself. So I mean, but if the lever tool, if you want to put the weight of the lever tool in there as well, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay. All right. Another one. If the tension is 3,000 pounds per leg, does that mean that the hoist will be lifting 6,000 pounds?
No, the hoist will still only be lifting the load that's on the hoist is only 3,000 pounds. That's it. The tension in each sling can be 3,000 pounds, and that's usually going to be at like about a 30-degree angle. If you're picking up a 3,000 pound load and you're seeing 3,000 pounds of tension and a nice symmetrical load, you're at about a 30-degree angle, and that's pretty tight. I don't know if you guys realize that or not, but that's pretty tight. But yeah, the hoist will still only see 3,000 pounds.
Okay. Perfect. Anyone have any more questions? Just as we wrap up. Let's see. Okay. This example is representative of a static load being lifted. How would one account for a non-static lifting scenario?
Would you referring to a dynamic load? In other words, something that's moving?
Yes, exactly. Yes.
That's a whole different ball game. Yeah, I'm just referring to static loads. When we're starting to get into dynamic loads. There's other things that have to be taken into account, and I don't have that information with me right now to
Okay.
to really answer that question.
Okay. Perfect. So we're just talking static loads right now. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you, Jeremy. All right. Another question came in. Let's see. Let me go back. A lot are coming in right now. Let's see. Another question came in. Doesn't it depend? This is going back to the sling angles. Doesn't it depend on the sling angle on what the hoist will see?
No, the hoist will only see the load itself. The angles, when you put slings into angles, the tension in the sling can grow, but the hoist will only see what the actual load weight is.
Okay. All right, let's see if that answered your question. Another one, fall arrest, HLLs attached to our product.
Say that again?
It says fall arrest, HLLs, are HLLs attached to your product? Maybe Peter, if you could maybe elaborate on that a little?
Yeah, please, because not only that, but it's what we're talking about here really doesn't apply to fall arrest.
Okay. Okay, maybe he can elaborate a little.
Yeah.
Okay, can you use 2 lever pullers instead of using slings?
The issue that you're going to run into with using multiple lever tools in a situation like I have there is inside the lever tool, there's what we call a Weston style brake. That Weston style brake relies on the load weight itself to open and close the brake. In other words, the brake gets activated by how much load it sees. If you split the load between another lever tool, the actual load that first lever tool's supposed to see isn't going to see it because it's going to be getting offset by the second one. We have actually had occasions where we've had customers hook up multiple hand hoist as well as lever tools on a load, and the biggest complaint that they have is that they're basically chasing their tail. And what I mean by that is they'll level off one corner, and then all of a sudden the other corner starts to drift a little bit, so they go and they level that one off, and then they level off another one, and they level off another one, and they keep going around in a circle because neither one of them actually tightens up. The brake doesn't actually close the way it's designed to close because it needs the weight of the load, and because it's being shared by multiple hoists, it doesn't actually see that load, and that brake doesn't close. So I would advise that if you are going to consider using a compensator tool or a lever tool the way we've shown here, use one in that scenario. Do not use multiples, because then otherwise it just won't hold properly.
Okay, I did get an answer back. HLL is horizontal lifelines. Going back to
that has to do with fall protection. We're talking about static, non-organic loads. Okay. We're not lifting people with this.
Okay.
Or securing people.
Okay. Let's see. A question came up. Well, there are a couple questions on this topic. Shouldn't there be a second device in the hook? I've always only used 1 point in a hook.
I'm not sure what you mean by, in other words, are you saying that you can only put 1 item in a hook versus putting 2 slings in a hook? In the same hook?
Yeah, let's see if he comes back with that question.
Yeah,
Should be a second device in the hook?
I need a little clarification on that one.
Okay, and this might tie into another question that came up. Can you go back to slide 14, Henry? Yeah, there was just a question about the hook and the member inside of it. if there was anything else that should be added to that.
The hook, well, which
You know
hook?
what, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll send you this comment later and you can respond.
Okay,
Yeah, maybe it'll be a little more exchange there. Okay.
okay.
Because it's really hard to explain with so many people on the call. Okay, so how is the weight calculated on the sling at a 30-degree angle?
It's called load angle factor. At 30 degrees from the horizontal, the load angle factor is going to be 2. So whatever on a nice symmetrical load, if you have a symmetrical load and you have, say you're picking up an I-beam, for example, and that I-beam weighs 1,000 pounds, and you have an attachment point at each end of the I-beam. So we've got 2 angles, 2 slings, all right, or even a dual leg sling. Because you're at a 30-degree angle, the load angle factor that you're going to use is going to be 2. So if you have a 1,000-pound beam and you've got 2 attachment points, that means that there's going to be 1,500 pounds on one side, 1,500 pounds on the other side. All right, so because we've got a nice symmetrical load, so half the load is on one side, half the load's going to be on the other side. Because we have a load angle factor of 2, we're going to take that 1,500 pounds, we're going to multiply it times 2, and that's going to come up with 3,000 pounds. So that because we're at a 30-degree angle, the tension that is in each leg of that sling is going to be 3,000 pounds. So if you're dealing with, say you have 2 slings that you want to use rather than a dual leg sling, you're going to put 2 individual slings in there. You have to make sure that each sling can handle at least a 3,000 pound load, because that's how much tension that is going to be in that sling. So I mean I keep saying load, tension, they're kind of, in some cases they're interchangeable when it's being used in terms of tension. The load on that sling, the tension on that sling will be 3,000 pounds. So that'll be 3,000 pounds. The other side will also be 3,000 pounds. The hoist mechanism that you have at the top that's actually going to be carrying all of this is only going to be seeing the 3,000 pound load from the beam. That's it.
Okay, there are quite a few questions coming in. I think the best thing we can do is I'll have Henry respond to you directly. Some of them are talking about the same kind of concepts and ideas, but he will respond to you each directly with your questions. Some of them require a little bit more insight from him. Yeah, and I mean, it looks like we've got, Henry, some really good blog content. So we may even turn some of these, like we talked about at the beginning, into blog articles, because a lot of you are speaking about the same kind of topics. So this is really great. I know we are out of time. We just hit 45 minutes. But as I said, Henry will respond to you each personally with answers to your questions. And a few of them I think we're going to tackle in blogs. As a follow-up, if there are some common contexts that we've seen here, we can even provide the response in the follow-up email we send you. There are a few things that have come up today that I think we can share, Henry, that would be a good reference. I know one of the topics that you just mentioned, we have an article on, we can send as a reference. And
Yes.
then a couple other things hit me that you've written about before that we can also include as a link. So any resources that we've discussed today that we already have available, we will send in a follow-up email. So look for that. And as I said, Henry will answer your final question. So we're really thankful that you all joined today. I know everybody's busy and have a lot on their plates. So thank you for your attendance. And we appreciate any feedback you can provide, any future topics. And yes, someone just said, can we have another webinar on the topic that can be longer? Absolutely. We'd love to. We try to be very respectful of your time because, as we said, we know there's a lot of things going on right now, but definitely maybe we can have a follow-up to this. And my email will be on the email you receive from us. So please just share your comments and feedback and ideas for a future webinar. We're happy to have it. We can make it very engaging. And if you like, I can even ask for your questions in advance, so that we can make sure that we cover some of the content or questions you have on the topics that we'll be covering. But this is great. Really appreciate all your engagement. And again, you'll be hearing more from us in the next day or two on what we just shared. So thank you. Appreciate the very kind words. And yeah, hope everybody has a great day. Bye-bye.
Take care.